Not only are we on playback, but we are also on Twitch and Kick. So just figured I will let you guys know that as well, and let me do a quick plug regarding both of those platforms. Is the ETB network recently just joined them within the last several days. Okay. But yeah, those are new platforms now on Twitch and Kick. This is within the last 4 or 5 days or so. Here we go. What's up, sports fans? Got some amazing news that makes catching your favorite shows easier than ever. If you're hooked on the dynamic content and great analysis from playback.tv, you can now find us in even more places. That's right. As I just alluded to, playback.tv is now expanding its live reach to the Empty the Bench podcast networks, Kick and Twitch channels. Playback TV is still your home for premier sports content, but now we're broadcasting live on these new platforms to bring the conversation directly to you. We want you to stop missing out on the instant analysis and real time interaction that only a live show can deliver. Whether it's game day reactions or deep dive interviews, we're broadcasting on Kick and Twitch so that you can chat with the hosts and community live. To catch the expanded live schedule, just search for at ETB Network, that is at ETB NETWRK, on both Kick and Twitch, no caps or spaces. That's ETB Network. Follow us today and never miss a live moment of the great content you expect from Playback TVs. Well, shout out to Kick and Twitch for being other providers for our streams as well. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention um, Novik, because Novik is our new commercial sponsor that provides all of our plays for every single week across all the different sports, and it's another way to interact and place plays, if you will, on various games. So here we go. Zinger Part 2 is powered by Novik, America's #1 sports prediction market. Available right now in 35 states, including California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, and New York. I know because you're 10 times more likely to win long term compared to a traditional sports book because you're playing against real users and not the house. Sign up today and use the promo code ETB Network. Again, that is ETB and ETWRK for exclusive bonuses. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Zanzinger Part 2, going to be about 30 minutes as per usual today, going over the latest and greatest in the world of sports. We will be discussing the World Series that took place last night. It was not originally part of the show, but we will talk about that. We will also talk about the stuff that was going to be included in the show to begin with. We're going to be talking about UFC Vegas 110, what happened from that last night at the Apex in Vegas. There was a lot of controversy. I'll go over how I did on the card as well. We will also go over all of what happened in college football. We'll talk about Illinois going into its bye week. Got a huge win yesterday against Rutgers. I was in attendance for it. Got to be part of Brett Bielema's post game press conference as well. So we'll get into that, and then we'll get into a bunch of other stuff as well over the course of the next 30 minutes. But let's start with where I was yesterday. I went back down to Champaign for my fourth Illinois football game this season. Illinois fresh off back-to-back losses to Ohio State and Washington with a bye week sandwiched in between there. Illinois still looking, or was on the quest rather, to try to get back to a 9-win season for the second consecutive year and clinch consecutive bowl berths for the first time since the 2010 and 2011 seasons, respectively. Well, Illinois did just that and a whole lot more. A dominant win for the Illini at home, beating a lowly Rutgers team that now falls to 1-5 in the Big Ten, meaning that they would have to win out the rest of the way in order to even make a bowl game at this point. So let's go over some of the numbers and key takeaways from this win, and I'll go over a few fun facts courtesy of Illini stats and notes as well. So here we go. Here we go. All right. Okay. Illinois is 4-1 at home this season after a 35-13 win against Rutgers. Illinois had a 99-yard touchdown drive that opened the game and opened the scoring for Illinois. 99 yards on their first series, and it was Altmaier to Fagan to score that first touchdown. Um, and Hank Beatty now has 3 touchdowns on the day. Um, Hudson Clement registered his first receiving score as an Illini, tallying 5 catches for 84 yards. Colin Dixon was the fourth different receiver to get into the end zone this year with his third quarter catch. Gabe Backus had a day, 2 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss. He moved into sole possession of third place of the program's career sacks list. The Illini finished with a season most 210 rushing yards as a team, while totaling 445 yards of offense. All right, let's go over some notes now with what this win means for the program. So, Illinois is postseason eligible in back to back seasons, as I alluded to. It'll have to wait for its bowl destination site in about a month or so, a month and a couple days. Rumblings of could it be the Citrus Bowl again? There was a Citrus Bowl representative at the game yesterday. Also, other possibilities: the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa, which I've also been to, the Music City Bowl, which is usually a Big Ten SEC matchup around New Year's, and then the other outlier, which would be if Illinois probably goes 8-4. I think 8-4 would be the only way they get into this bowl, given what the past few years have been like for the bowl. But the SRS Las Vegas Distribution Bowl is another possibility at Allegiant Stadium. So, 4 legitimate possibilities right now of what bowl they could get. The only way Illinois could see itself playing in one of the lesser bowl games is if, for whatever reason, it loses its final 3 games to finish 6-6, which would be a catastrophic disaster. I don't see that happening though. So bank on 8-4 or 9-3, but it'll probably be 9-3 given to Illinois has left. Just to go over its remaining schedule, it has a bye. Then it plays Maryland, who's very okay, but not great. They were trounced by Indiana yesterday by double digits. So we actually won that play. So I was happy about that. I think it was the only play we won because we had Michigan covering against Purdue, and that didn't happen. And then the other one we had, I'm trying to think of what it was. And we had USC covering against Nebraska, but Nebraska covered because they only lost by 4, and it was 4.5. When I played it on, well, when I did the pick, I think it was more than that, so we would have lost anyway. So I think we went 1-2 on college football yesterday, but I'd have to double confirm. Nonetheless, though, um, those are the bowl possibilities. And I was going over the remaining schedule. I got bogged down by Maryland. So they have a bye this week, then they host Maryland, then they go to Wisconsin, which is to me the last game on the schedule where a win is almost all but guaranteed. Uh, Given that Wisconsin hasn't scored 100 points in total this season, was shut out on multiple occasions. The past few weeks gave a decent game to Oregon, but didn't play well enough to stay in the game. The only reason why it was somewhat close was because Dante Moore was injured. So there was that. But that seems to me like the final guaranteed win of the season for Illinois. And then, of course, as I just alluded to, Maryland. And then at the end of the year, which it's actually become a pretty good rivalry, Northwestern. So the Northwestern game, I think, is one to circle because the last few years, Northwestern has given Illinois fits. So you got to go back to 2018. So Northwestern was in sole control of the rivalry for much of the Lovey Smith regime. I think Lovey, I'm almost positive Lovey never beat them. And if he did, I can't remember when it would have been, but I think he might have won he might have beat them once. But when I was in school, they always lost to them. And his final home game um, against Northwestern in 2019, they lost to a backup quarterback. Illinois was still bowl eligible, but they could have gone into the bowl game at 7-5 instead of 6-6. Instead, they lost to Northwestern, and then they lost to Cal in the Red Box Bowl in mid December that year. I didn't go to the game, but that was not a very good team. Um, and then ever since Bielema has took over, he's won 3 out of 4 against Northwestern. He's 3-1 as Illinois' coach in head to head in the rivalry. I've been to 2 out of those 4 wins. Both were in Chicago/Evanston. I went to the final game at Old Ryan Field in 2022. Um, between the two programs, because the 2023 game was in Champaign, and then the other one I went to was last year at Wrigley Field. So I've never seen the game in Champaign, hoping to hopefully do that at the end of this month. But nonetheless, though, the last few years, Illinois has regained control of the hat. Northwestern had it in 23, gave it up in 24. Northwestern still with much to play for as the season winds down itself. It had a bye this week as well, but it'll play USC this upcoming Friday. Critical game, a swing game in the Big Ten, perhaps. Then you get a Minnesota team that bounced back in a big way after losing to Iowa. They beat Michigan State yesterday. So that might be an interesting game, depending on what Minnesota team shows up. And you have a Michigan team that seems like they're on a collision course to play Ohio State, where it's a win and in for Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game. That's another possible trap game that Michigan can't overlook, because Northwestern, I think, is going to play them pretty hard, at least for a half, but Michigan is clearly the better team. So I think, given what I just told you guys, I think Illinois, last game of the year for Northwestern, is a win and in scenario for the bowl. I really do. I just, for whatever reason, I think Northwestern's momentum was so shot after last week's Nebraska heartbreaker, and I called this. I said the claps would begin starting last week, and I feel like it's about to start here. They'd won 4 games in a row. They've now lost to Nebraska. If they lose this one, that's 2 in a row. And I don't know. I think Minnesota is. I'm sorry. I think the remainder of their schedule, simply put, they're playing better teams. It's it's simple. It's as simple as that. Every team on paper that Northwestern has remaining should beat them. In theory, I just think Northwestern always plays well in Champaign. It seems like that's been a theme every 2 years, that no matter how bad, besides 2021, they didn't play well in Champaign in 21. But the last decade or so, Northwestern has played really well down there, and they've won a lot of games down there. And I would not be surprised if that's a closer game than people think. I really would not be surprised at all. And I would not be surprised if Northwestern plays desperate. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to go for trick plays and a bunch of different things to confuse a rather depleted Illinois defense. Yeah, I understand Illinois' defense played well yesterday, but that that Illinois defense, let's be real, that was against Maryland, or excuse me, Rutgers rather, and Rutgers is nothing to sneeze at. So I think we have to give credit where credit is due, but also realize at the same time that that's a game that I think has a chance to be one of the more entertaining rivalry games of the final week of the regular season. And if the scenario is, Northwestern is 5-6 going into that last game, which they very well could be, they'll be playing desperate. They'll be playing desperate. They'll be playing to win. They'll be trying to do some things that Illinois may not be prepared for, and if they are, they'll have to be double prepared. I really hope going into that last game that Illinois doesn't think that Northwestern can just come into Champaign and they're gonna roll over. I think if Northwestern has something to play for, I think if they have a bull berth on the line to get in, and pull off a major upset in the process, they're going to play their asses off. That's for sure. But hopefully, Northwestern can steal one of these games to get to bowl eligibility. Um, but again, easier said than done. USC, really good offense. Michigan seems to be playing more balanced. Minnesota, when they're healthy, they play really well. Um, I mean, it's gonna be a challenge. I mean, this is as hard of a back half of a schedule for any team in the Big Ten that I've seen. Where you don't have to play. I mean, shoot, the only thing that would make this schedule harder is if they had to play Ohio State at the end of the year, which they don't. So I don't know. I think Northwestern's got to steal one of these games, and I think that Illinois game is going to be very interesting. So, kind of moving right along, let's talk about the rest of the Big Ten slate before we move on to the World Series and UFC Vegas 110. Going over that from last night. Let's even tell you about the standings because the Big Ten standings are a mess at the moment. For teams not named Indiana or Ohio State. So Indiana improved to it should be 7-0. Um, it should be yeah, Indiana improved to 9-0. Ohio State's 8-0. Indiana still leads the conference because they played one more conference game than Ohio State. Um, at present. But when you look at the bottom of the league, it's a freaking mess for for third and fourth place. So right now there is a three-way there's a Michigan's all alone in third place. Then there's a three-way tie for fourth, right? Then you get into the fifth place category, and it's a holy shit moment. So I can kind of go through this for you guys a little bit. What I think makes this parody so interesting. So, obviously Ohio State and Indiana are the only two undefeated teams in the league. But you have Michigan, who's sitting there at 5-1. Its only losses to USC. Iowa's only loss in conference is to Indiana. They play Oregon this week, so there's going to be movement there. So one of these two teams is going to be 4-2 and fall way down in the standings, depending on what happens in the other games. So that's a head-to-head right there to take a look at. USC just beat Nebraska. Okay, so USC is now 4-1 in week play. Its only losses to Illinois. Minnesota just beat Michigan State. They have two conference losses. Their two conference losses are not great. They've lost to Ohio State and Iowa in two shellackings. And then Northwestern, its two losses are to Nebraska and Oregon. UCLA, you look at their its two losses rather. Um, it was beat by Northwestern at the beginning of the season, or way early on at the beginning of the season, and then the other Big Ten loss was to USC. In a very actually no, that was last season. My bad. The only other Big Ten loss was to Indiana. Duh, Indiana was last week. Then Washington, its two losses are to Michigan and Ohio State, and Illinois now sits at 500 in the league. They should be 4-2. They should be up where Minnesota is right now. But it is what it is. I'm still bitter that Washington beat them. But Illinois sits at 3-3. Its three losses are obviously the number one and number two, and of course Washington. Those are their three Big Ten losses. Their three wins are impressive. Maryland, excuse me, I keep saying Maryland. Rutgers, sorry, Rutgers, USC, and Purdue. Those are their three Big Ten wins. So again, logjam at the top of the standings, but when Iowa plays Oregon, I think a lot is going to be decided as to who's going to remain in that upper echelon for the home stretch of the year versus who is going to fall way to the bottom and be looking up at some of these other teams. Let's talk about some teams that are on the fringe of possibly missing a bowl game. Penn State would be one of them. It still has not won a Big Ten game. It fell to Ohio State yesterday in Columbus. So Penn State is now 0-5 in league play. Wisconsin probably won't make a bowl game unless it wins its final three games, which is easier said than done. Michigan State is in the same position as well. Let's take a look at Wisconsin's final three games, and they are not easy at all. You could say that these are three games where losses are almost guaranteed. Actually, wait, no, I'm sorry. There's four games to go, and they have to win three out of their final four to make a bowl game. It's going to be way easier said than done. They get Washington at home this Saturday. Then they don't have a bye week the rest of the way. Some of these teams do, but there are a few teams that don't. So Wisconsin's one of those teams that doesn't. They get Washington at home. They go to Indiana the next week, and then they host Illinois, and then they play Minnesota. But that could be a losing streak of all losing streaks. Wisconsin has not won since the month of September, so they might lose out and go 2-10 for all we know. But the scenario is they have to win three out of their final four to get into a bowl game. All right. All right. Michigan State is 3-6. Its best chance to win a league game was yesterday. They lost in overtime. I don't know. Could they beat Penn State? Honestly, this back half of the schedule isn't that bad. If they would have beat Minnesota yesterday, their back half of the schedule looks pretty damn good because they get Penn State this or in 2 weeks. They have a bye this week. They're one of the other teams like Illinois that is a bye this upcoming Saturday. Then they play Penn State in a neutral field. That's at Ford Field, I'm pretty sure, in Detroit. But that's a game that they could win, given that Penn State has not won a league game. They have a back quarterback and interim coach. I actually like Michigan State's chances there. I think they keep it close. The one where I think their season is going to be over is Iowa. So I think, if anything, they'll either beat Penn State and Iowa, and that last game of the year is going to determine whether they get into a bowl or their bowl chances die November 22nd. So they win their first league game in 2 weeks, then they lose to Iowa the next week, which would mean the best they can finish is 5-7 at that point, which even that might be a stretch also. So had they beat Minnesota, what I'm saying is, had they beat Minnesota, their back half would have looked pretty damn good. So just something to bear in mind there. All right, let's take a look at some other teams that are, well, here's one team that was officially eliminated from bowl eligibility. That was last night. Purdue, welcome to the non-bowl eligibility club. It fell to 2-7 overall, losing a very, very, very exciting game to Michigan at the Big House. Michigan just didn't play well last night, but it goes to show, I keep saying it, they're not very good. The wins haven't come. They've only won 2 games and they were out of conference, Southern Illinois and Ball State. But in almost every Big Ten game that Purdue has played, minus maybe Illinois, they've shown that they can play well and hang with some of these teams. That's now 6 one-scored losses for Purdue. I mean, imagine if you win 3 of those games and you're sitting at 3-3 with all these other teams fighting for positioning. I mean, they were this close to being a decent team in the mid-tier of the Big Ten. So it may not look good record-wise, but I think Odom has his guys in the right direction. I think he realizes it, and even Brett Bielema admitted when Odom was hired that they would win a lot of games. So I'm interested to see what comes of that. And I'm interested to see what comes of that. And I do think in the coming years you're going to see Purdue become not a great team, but a team where they're competing with the likes of Nebraska and Illinois and Northwestern for that. And I hope Illinois isn't middle of the pack. I hope these potentially 9-win seasons continue. But if we're talking about in a general sense, if Purdue can be in that middle tier Big Ten, I think there'd be tons of people that would be satisfied with that. So Purdue was the first team to get effectively eliminated from bowl contention last night. what are some other teams that are on the verge of possibly missing a bowl game? Well, Rutgers losing to Illinois, that didn't do them any favors. They're now 4-5 in the Big Ten. They come home next week and they play Maryland. It's pretty freaking hilarious and ironic how that works out. So Rutgers plays Purdue and Illinois, and then Illinois in 2 weeks plays Maryland, and Rutgers and Maryland play each other this week. It's bizarre how that works out. 1 week Rutgers is in Champaign, 2 weeks later Maryland is in Champaign. Like it's interesting. It's interesting how that worked out. I just figured I would mention that. You don't usually see that very often. So looking at Rutgers' remaining schedule, do I think it makes a bowl games? They're 4-5 and they have 3 games to go. I I don't think so. I don't think so because you get Maryland at home. Maryland's the better football team. It's as simple as that. I think Maryland just has better talent offensively. So I'm gonna say they lose that game. Ohio State guaranteed loss, barring a colossal upset. That would be insane if they were even competitive against Ohio State. And then Penn State at home. These are two teams that could be fighting for bowl eligibility. You may have not believed it at the beginning of the year. Given that Penn State was preseason number 2 and it had all these expectations and whatnot. I don't know. What I can tell you is, um, what I can tell you is that'll be a very interesting game. If both teams are 500 and they need to they need to win to get into a bowl game, that'll be a dogfight. That'll be a good game. But I think I think Rutgers has 2 winnable games. If it shows up, it'll beat Maryland. If it doesn't, it'll lose. And the Penn State game is a toss up. Ohio State, to me, is the only guaranteed loss out of the final 3. If the Rutgers game was in State College, I would say, yeah, they're not winning that. But with it being in Piscataway and with it being potentially cold and maybe there's some snow on the ground that day, you never know. It could be a low scoring, ugly, icy game that just isn't very well I mean, you never know. And they barely lost. I mean, think about how close Rutgers has been for parts of this season. They barely lose to Minnesota in a very good game. Minnesota just survived to win that game, and they barely lose to Iowa. I mean, they've only been blown out 3 times this whole year, which in the grand scheme isn't that bad. So I don't know. I don't know. All I know is Rutgers needs 2 wins in its final 3, and it needs to start this week. I think if they can beat Maryland, they should feel really good about beating Penn State at the end of the season. So that's how I see Rutgers. Let's take a look at Penn State. So Penn State is now 0-5. I can't believe that I'm saying it. They've yet to win a league game. And they have 4 games to go. And it's going to be tough. I'm just going to say that. I don't think their first. Well, okay, this is where it gets strange because Penn State has never lost to Indiana at home, like in the history of Penn State, from what I understand. So Indiana has a chance to do something funny, which is go in and beat Penn State in a hostile environment Saturday and maintain its number 2 ranking. Well, that's the part that where I just struggle with this because to me, there's out of its final 4 games, there's 2 wins on the schedule. I think there's 2 possible wins. Michigan State, if it shoots itself in the foot, Penn State will win that game. And if Rutgers doesn't show up like they did against Illinois, where they play flat and they don't score and they can't finish drives, I think Penn State wins that game. So I think I think 2-2 is a possibility because your 2 losses that I see are Indiana and Nebraska. So there's Penn State. All right. And then finally, and then finally, let's wrap this up because we have a few minutes left. Um, World Series, congratulations to the LA Dodgers. Shout out to all my friends on playback last night. We were on here. I wasn't on here, but they were on here. Baseball guys were uh, shooting the shit and having a good time. Dodgers win in heroic fashion, 5-4, back-to-back World Series champions. Great season for the Blue Jays. It was a fun year. I loved overall just how that series went. I thought the Dodgers would play the Mariners, so I was wrong there. But overall, though, I thought everybody involved was just clutch the end of the game, and then just the way LA was able to survive the end of that game was just something of epic proportions. That's one of the better game sevens in a long time. And I'm excited to see what both teams do this offseason. Would be a fun rematch. Curious to see how that would play out if it were to be a rematch next year, or if both teams, remain in contention for the World Series. That would be interesting as well. So I was happy to see how that ended. And then finally, UFC Vegas 110. We'll get more into this on the MMA Outsiders Tuesday. But it was an interesting card. Jack Gold did really well in predictions. He was 3 fights better than me. He went 8-5. I went 5-8. Steve Garcia with a dominant first round TKO win over David Onama. We won that play on Novik that was minus 136. So shout out to Novik for those great odds on Steve Garcia. He initially called out Max Holloway for a BMF, but realizes that it's not going to be possible. He's eyeing Josh Emmett next. And then because we don't really have a lot of time and we got to get moving here with all the other programming we have today, we will get into Isaac Dolgarian versus Del Valle and the controversy that was that fight earlier in the evening. But for now, though, that's going to do it. It's Zain Zinger Part 2. It's been another production on Playback, Kick, and Twitch. Thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. We will be back next week. And just as a reminder, no formal episode this week. We're going to be dropping a couple interviews. So stay tuned for those with 3 pretty prominent names and one name that you might recognize. He's been in the news a lot lately. So I'm excited to talk to him. I can't really speak on who I'm interviewing yet, but once those are out, we will post those. And stay tuned for episode 67, which will drop 12 days from today, 3 Eastern, noon Pacific. We'll go over what happened in college football the week before. We'll preview Illinois, Maryland, which I'll be in attendance for the following day. We'll talk about the NFL and a bunch of other stuff. And of course, because we would be idiots if we didn't, we will be discussing the UFC 322 pay-per-view headlined by JDM and Islam Makhachev. And in the co-main event, Weili Zhang and Valentina Shevchenko. I'm getting my champions all mixed up. But nonetheless, though, hope you have a great Sunday. Enjoy all the football. Come on here and watch Red Zone. It's free to do so. It would be really, really awesome if you guys did. And until next time, I